Distributed Dissent.
Hi, welcome to Distributed Dissent. This is our first episode. My name is An Hong, the CEO of Generis AI, a Hong Kong-based regulatory technology company, and I'm joined by...
Hi, my name is Mathias Bock. I am the CEO of Tokuma Labs. We're a time intelligence company based out of Tokyo, building automation tools for lawyers.
Both of us are lawyers, so we hope to talk about kind of the intersection of law and AI and kind of whatever fancies us during this next hour, and kind of what it's like to be a kind of legal tech founder. Both of us are lawyers. Both of us work in finance. And
We've both gotten out.
We've both gotten out. I don't know for the better or not. We can talk about that a little bit. And we've been doing this for both of us for a little over a year, right? Mm-hmm. For our respective firms. So we hope this is useful to everyone. For us, for the last kind of couple of weeks, we have participated in Hong Kong FinTech Week. We were on stage pitching to some of the investors here, talking to some of the other FinTech firms, and generally just trying to get getting clients, building our products, moving one step at a time. And I guess from like a local perspective, there's a lot of like macro issues with like China and other things. And so while we're growing our clients here, we definitely see like in terms of future business growth, I think the US is still the way to go, right? It still has the most financial firms for us to target and the most kind of like true like scalability.
It really does seem like the most homogeneous market to tackle. And like operationally, I think there is another aspect to that. I feel like a lot of the tools that we're expected to use as a young startup, be that ESOPs, just the whole way we structure the firm, the company, all of that is very much driven by Silicon Valley. And when you take that out of the context of the US, where, of course, there's 50 states with a single currency and a largely similar legal system, of course, you take that out, you plug that into Asia, it just doesn't really quite work as simply like that, right?
Yeah. Are you guys a Tokyo Topco? I actually don't know.
Yeah. Tokyo-based, Tokyo company, yeah.
So how is it, how does that, well, Japan's, I think, a much more like mature market in terms of startups than Hong Kong. How does that work in terms of like these kind of things? Is it difficult?
Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen with raising, we're going to have to see. But the expectation of raising in Japanese yen is, I'm not sure yet. I think it's an interesting proposition because the yen is just so weak, so it's just such a no-brainer from an FX perspective.
Yeah.
At the same time, of course, people are just really not used to dealing with Japanese vehicles and all these rules, and there's some funky rules around employee participation and things like that. Nothing overly burdensome, but it's still there, and I think it's just this kind of, I don't know it, I don't want to have to deal with it. I could choose between 15 different investments, so why would I go with the one that gives me a headache or potentially gives me a headache? Yeah. So we're seeing a little bit of that. But I mean, in terms of Japan ecosystem, I think the government really wants to do something there, but it's also Japan. It's also very much like one large super tanker. And I just saw this this note that somebody sent through from one of the talks they attended, and the Western way is very much the way of speed and individuality. The Japanese way is very much one of we're moving in unison, and that requires a lot of relationship building, etc. And of course, when you're doing a lot of that, that is somewhat counterintuitive to the startup world, at least as we're being told about it. So getting that right and navigating that is probably the most difficult piece for Japanese startups.
So it's like it's almost like the way of doing business is
quite different. Yeah.
It's different.
I suppose for us, it doesn't really make that much of a difference in the sense, I mean, that's our base and it's just financially attractive. Like top talent, I can get a fraction of what I would have to pay them in Hong Kong or even in Hong Kong, really? Even Silicon Valley. I was speaking with someone recently who had a delegation over from Hong Kong, from the Hong Kong government, and they were saying, "Oh, it's very attractive in Hong Kong. You just pay people 2 million honkies, and we're just going to give them a visa waiver and
top tier talent,
top tier talent." And of course, the guy in Tokyo was like, 2 million Hong Kong dollars. I can hire 4 people in Tokyo for that. Like, it's just not attractive, right?
Yeah, but I mean the $2 million is definitely an exception, right? Like engineers here don't make that much money unless you're like the very best. I think like starting salaries for engineers here are like 25K Hong Kong a month.
That's not my experience, to be honest. In my last role as a COO as a prop tech startup here in Hong Kong, I mean our CTO, our top engineers, they made over $1 million. And some people that we looked at who we didn't end up hiring, they wanted a lot more. So it was actually quite difficult.
I wonder if that's changed because of the climate in China.
In what way?
There's just more competition for these jobs. So like if you are a tech company here in Hong Kong, you have some sort of relationship to like Science Park or Cyberport. You can do what's called a tech task visa. And so you can directly hire technology talent from mainland China and sponsor a visa firm here. And you need to pay them, market rate. And so we were doing this, we were looking at it. And for a junior, right? Market rate for like a junior full stack developer between 1 to 3 years of experience is like 25K Hong Kong.
That's not bad, actually.
Which is really not bad, right? And so, well, I think that like negative wage pressure has just been for like a lot of things, a lot of markets here because...
Except rent,
right? Except rent. Unless you're looking at office rent. Office rents have come down a lot. But in terms of like, just in terms of wages, because of that, the deflationary pressure coming out of China and how terrible the job situation is there, so many engineers, like not even just engineers, like talent in general, they just want to get out of China. And Hong Kong is at first, like a great kind of first step for them.
And that scheme would allow them to basically move to China, or would they be commuting to Shenzhen or? No,
it allows them to move to Hong Kong. So we would sponsor a mainland China talent to be able to work in Hong Kong with a full Hong Kong, it's like a 3-year work visa, and then it's just like any other work visa. Then they can renew it, and then in 7 years they can have a full Hong Kong PR. So I wonder if that dynamic has been. It's got to be there's got to be some wage pressure there on both the high end and the low end.
What about communication skills?
Well, then you need to be Mandarin speaking to really be able to connect, right?
We're in Hong Kong, so that seems to be a silly proposition to question. But at the same time, right, it does put some limitations around. Like team leads and people like that, right?
So if your technical lead doesn't speak Mandarin, it will be challenging to find talent that can speak English to a high level. And then of course at those wages it is a little different. You were just in Europe, talking to a bunch of law firms there. What have you been seeing in terms of like their attitude towards AI, the reception for your product, and like the general kind of like the startup scene there?
It was a really interesting trip for a variety of reasons. So first of all, I think there is like light and shadow, like very close by each other. There's this whole group of people in legal who they're just enamored with AI and they basically just want to, the next chance they get, like open an AI native law firm, whatever that might look like. Maybe we can talk about that at some point. But then there's the much, much larger group who says, leave me alone with it. I couldn't care less. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm going to be doing this for another 15, ideally 10 if I can manage. And
that's the next generation problem.
The world's not going to move that fast. Things are going to stay pretty much the same. So that was an interesting piece. At the same time, like the larger the better organized, the more managed organizations, they do realize that there is pressure on them to change. And but again, if you take the European view, that's one way of looking at the world. I think the US view is also slightly different. So I happened to meet up with a friend who's a partner at a big international law firm in New York. He was just in town in London, and we were having dinner. And he said it's very simple, right? Like we need to. There's no magic around these numbers and these bills that we're writing. It's very simply a calculation of, look, like a junior partner needs to be able to take out 7 figures. We have a certain overhead of a number of staff, lawyers, associates, and we have office rent, and some general travel costs and things like that. And then you can just break it down, right? Like there's so many hours in the day. How many hours can you possibly work? And then you do the math that way, right? Like that was a very
But that's assuming that their clients continue to pay the same rates.
And that is exactly that. And for the US, that seems to be the case, right? Like so far, yeah. We'll see how that continues. And yeah, sort of by the same token, right? Like big firms have said to me also, look, our clients are asking, right? Like, we love your work. We love working with you. We really value your advice, but the whole business has to cut 20% cost. Legal is not going to be excluded from that. Now, you can't answer that question today. I understand that, but please go away, come back in 6 months and tell me how you're utilizing AI tools to make my life better, faster, cheaper, whatever the metric you want to apply, right? So those requests do come in. So big firms see that pressure. And in the end, I think what we're seeing, and that is like a little bit down your alley, right? There's going to be an ever-increasing portion of the legal services market that's somewhat commoditized with tools. This doesn't require genius to figure it out. It's just a lot of paperwork. And that portion is probably going to grow. However, there's going to remain that portion, that slice of the market where you really shouldn't be charging $1,500 or $2,000. You should be charging probably more like $10,000 because what you're doing is so unique
it's
and
similarly
specialized.
priceless, right? You're the only partner in the world, or one of 5 that can really deliver the outcome that you need. And that's such an interesting dynamic now because it's almost like the opposite is happening in China. Like the red circle firms in China, which are the best law firms in the world. Maybe there was that book recently, right? Like China is run by engineers and America is run by lawyers. And in China now, the situation has gone so bad. This, it's part of the deflationary spiral that the law firms are now working for their clients for free. For transactions, for deals, the competitive pressure has gone so bad that these companies are telling these law firms, well, we think you're a fungible commodity. Like any red circle law firm is going to be as good as anyone else. And so for the last couple of years, they've just been undercutting each other. They'll do it for less and they'll do it for less. Will you match their price or go lower? And you've kind of had to say, if you wanted the work, you kind of had to say, yes, I'll go lower. And now they've gone so low, they've hit literally rock bottom. They're working for free. And so as a consequence, I heard someone tell me that they've cut like salaries of junior lawyers of these best law firms in China, like top tier graduates, right? To something like 3,500 RMB a month.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely ridiculous. And because they're working, if your firm is working for their clients for free, just in the hopes that once this bounces back, at least we'll keep those relationships and we'll have we just need to survive longer than our competitors do.
It becomes a financing game rather than
it's a financing game.
Competition
game. It's a financing game. It's a game of attrition. But almost like the only way then that you can, even if the market bounces back, is that you almost have to do a little bit of like what we try to do is build AI that does the work, does the repeatable, non-unique work at a price that now the Chinese client market expects, right? Like the marginal cost is 0 or close to 0 for them. And I wonder if this kind of competitive pressure coming out of China will spread other places. Like it's such like a huge divergence, right? Like right now, legal services in China, well, one, they're not seen as like trusted partners or advisors. They're just kind of seen as you sell a product.
Document lackeys.
Exactly, your document lackeys. You sell a product. We need to get this transaction done. You need to paper it over.
Yeah, I mean, I've had an interesting thought, and it's always hard to predict anything, especially the future. So to claim the tide is turning would be probably a bit too much. But I was having a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's a partner at a big firm in Hong Kong, and he was saying that they just recently bid for a piece of work with a Chinese client where, of course, all of these considerations going in, they really went very low in terms of pricing. And the client actually came back and said, look, like, this is a really important deal for us, and we're not sure you can deliver the quality that we need at the price point that you propose.
Yeah.
So when he was starting the story, I was absolutely prepared to kind of go down the regular mantra, okay, and it was still too much, right? But no, very opposite. The client actually said, we think this is too cheap. Like, can you actually give us your best advice at that price point? And my friend's point there was, there's also a shift in leadership in some of these Chinese companies, right? Sort of maybe not quite the state-owned enterprises yet, but some of the other privately owned companies where sort of younger people are getting into charge, or people in their 40s, mid 40s maybe, getting into positions where they become decision makers, and they are potentially overseas educated. They've seen more slices of the market in other parts of the world where it works, have a bit more experience, and as such realize that, well, maybe we can gouge the firm on this deal right now, and we're going to get somewhere. But if everyone needed to restructure this, for example, in 5 years' time, we're going to have such a hard time because this is going to be such a terrible...
it's almost like legal technical debt, right? It's like you can you can vibe code an app, have no idea what the code says, but if it works... then you need to go back and fix it, and then it's going to be a nightmare.
So that's gonna come around and bite people, I think. But at the same time, I mean, Western firms have been saying that for the last 15 years, right? So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that class of firms that are more internationalized, and there's a huge amount of, like, every Chinese company now wants to go international because they can't make money domestically because they're all competing each other to death. So they know they need to come out and they need to find other markets, because other markets will actually pay them more than zero for their services and goods. And the firms that will be able to do that will be the ones that realize that, doing business internationally does require a certain level of preparedness on the legal front and every other front. And so, paying the absolute cheapest provider doesn't necessarily get you the best results, right? But I feel like it's still minority, because there's still not that many of them that have worked overseas, understand how to take a business overseas, and is willing to pay for quality. There are a few, but it's not a lot. And then hopefully the market does change once more of them try to come out of China and they realize that, okay, legal services are actually worth something, right? It is worth something to have a true expert in this domain to help us navigate some of like these markets that we don't understand at all, and help us get through them. And that advice is valuable. But at the same time, like, I think what you were mentioning earlier, that dichotomy of where you probably will have experts that charge $10,000 an hour because they're one of 5 people in the world that can do this. And then, like, what percentage of the other legal work is really just a commodity where you can have like AI do it essentially, almost, or AI plus a human do it at a vastly lower price point.
Yeah, and this is also part of the motivation for Tokuma Labs in the sense that, I mean, obviously, so we're starting at the timesheet level, helping lawyers to write their timesheets, because if you pay thousands of dollars for an hour as a client, understandably, you want to understand how did that time get spent. So just making that a bit easier and relieving lawyers of some of that drudge work. But what's actually really driving this whole proposition is in order to better employ tools, in order even just to better understand how are we doing this, people need to look closer. And I think this is where a lot of excitement in the legal tech space is around tools for lawyers delivering their work. So be it drafting tools or better document management tools or review tools or research tools, like all of those things which I equate kind of with the glory hours of the lawyer's day. But we're doing something entirely different, right? We're starting at the very opposite end. Like that's not the glory hours when you're sitting there at 3 a.m. trying to do your timesheet, probably not doing it. We're trying to automate that in order to get at that information, right? Like how are you doing this? What's the sequence of steps that you've worked through? Because that's such an interesting piece of information to optimize versus just arbitrarily saying, okay, well, we need to do this cheaper, right? Like this deal, we're just bidding on for a fixed fee with relatively little understanding of how many hours are we going to really need to deliver this, right?
Yeah, and I think you're actually getting at something really interesting because you're trying to capture data on almost industry know-how and how a process is undertaken, right? So if you can automate someone's timesheets, you can also gain insight into how they accomplish that piece of legal work.
Absolutely. Right?
So if I'm a 5th or 6th year lawyer and I have to work on a closing, what are the steps I'm taking to get to that closing? What am I researching? What am I working on? What order do I work on stuff? When do I pause even, right? At what sections of the agreement do I pause and you can tell I'm thinking or I'm really churning over why this is important. And this data is not found in any written form. Is not in any LLM that they can scrape and say, oh, this is how a 5th year associate does this kind of task. But I wonder, with that kind of know-how, then can you take that away and say, oh, now that we understand how you do this process, we can then build a system that can now do your work the way you did it. Because given the capabilities of whatever bleeding edge LLM is in place in 6 months, presumably you could then do that.
Yeah, I think that's where it's kind of heading, right? And it's loaded with problems. How are we training the people to use these tools if they don't have much or any experience with some of the legwork? But in the end, right? The profitability of the firm, and that shouldn't be maybe the only measure, but the profitability of the firm is going to depend on the number of hours that go in and the speed at which they can deliver. And that's also going to be part of the client choice that they're making. So if we can improve that process, if we can speed up some of that delivery, I think there's going to be a trade-off with the thought process on the client side. I remember a long time ago, a friend of mine said, well, actually a lot of the work that I used to be an M&A lawyer, a lot of the work that we're doing in M&A is we're actually taking the client by the hand and we're walking them through a decision process which they don't really encounter on a day-by-day basis. And it just takes time for them to kind of marinate in that, in the different options and where could we go and where, for us who are doing this day in and day out, it's a fairly straightforward process in delineating that and then deciding. It's just not like that for the client, right? So I think there's going to be kind of this going to top out at some point. You're not going to be able to squeeze legal services into minutes because clients are not working at the same pace. And the moment until we see tools deployed in the client world that allow business decisions to be made at that pace, I think that's still a bit further away, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely, so I was having a conversation recently with one of the Google DeepMind team members who invented AlphaGo, which was like a bit of a fanboy moment, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool because essentially he said, things in the lab don't slow down, right? There's about 100 different things we could try at every different juncture, and we pick stuff we try, which we think is the lowest hanging fruit, and everything we touch kind of turns to gold almost. That's at least that was my takeaway. So With that, models are going to be incredibly capable. And we just saw Gemini 3 overnight. You've looked into this more than I have, but it seems to be just astoundingly capable, at least from the less than 24 hours or what that we had to look at it. But that capability is going to improve faster than we can imagine. But what none of these, and you alluded to that earlier, what none of these models have, they don't understand what to do, when to do, the sequence of how to go about it. And if you throw them at any problem right now, the distance they have to travel is just really far, right? They have to reason a lot, and I don't want to sort of use that term deflationarily, but the distance from, okay, go draft this contract, it's just a really far distance, right? From what are the things that all have to happen and what are all the considerations that have to go in. So augmenting that with a little bit of expert, this is how you do it, that seems to be a good path forward, at least for legal.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how, that's how we structure our business, right? Like our business is doing exactly that. Like we know that the default output, at least, we sell regulatory solutions. So the default output from a regulatory space is going to be the default. It's going to be whatever average that they've trawled, billions of documents to produce. But when we break that process down and we inject kind of the subject matter know-how into it, and we say, oh, don't try to do this entire thing at once. We're going to break it down to 10 sequences. Each sequence, you need to do these things, you need to think about these things, and you need to have this additional amount of context based on the work you're doing, the task that you have at hand, and think about these different things. So it's almost like we're doing a little bit of that reasoning for them, and we're giving them the information that the agent, that the LLM needs to accomplish that task, and then we chain it to the next step, and the next step, and the next step. So we're taking our hard-earned industry know-how, and we are teaching, or we're building an LLM that can almost assembly line assemble your finished product.
Would you say that's largely due to the fact that there's a well-defined endpoint? Because my impression, and I know next to nothing about compliance, I feel, but my impression of compliance is always, okay, you choose the middle of the road. Nobody's going to congratulate you if you're being compliant, right? You're only going to get a whooping if you're not.
Yeah.
So let's just not go fancy. Let's just conservatively middle of the road, and that's a fairly well-trodden path, right? So
compliance that's one way to think about it, but I've always viewed compliance as a risk that you have to manage, just like any other kind of risk of your business. And what that means is it comes with a cost, right? So if you screw up compliance, you get legal risk, you get reputation risk. At the worst case, you can go to prison, your firm can explode. On the other hand, if you're too conservative, especially in the financial services space, you shackle yourself. Like finance is the business of taking risk, right? It's the business of taking risk and earning rewards and trying to calculate that efficient threshold between risk and reward. And I've always viewed compliance as another threshold on that risk and reward basis. So it's like you want to be able to allow business enough allow the business to take regulatory risk, because regulations are not black and white still, right? It depends on what the market is doing, what regulators think. It depends on so many things. And so that's the art of, okay, are you a great compliance officer and a great legal counsel to your business partners, or are you adequate? And if you're adequate, you're taking the middle of road. Oh, everyone else is doing this, and so we're doing this too. And we won't get into trouble, and our budget looks like everyone else's budget, and it's fine. If you're great, then you are trading at that, efficient line. You can tell your business units, okay, we think we can push it a little bit here, right? We don't have to spend as much money being perfect on these kind of risks, because we know where the market at, and we know that the regulators are not going to push on this aspect. But on these other aspects, like, no, the juice is just not worth the risk that you're taking, right? Like you can make, an extra 50 basis points or another percentage on this transaction maybe, but then you're taking an outsized level of regulatory risk there. So don't do it.
And that's much more of a judgment call.
And that is a pure judgment call. And if you ask AI to make that judgment call today, it'll, because of how they're pre-trained and how they're created, they'll just take the most conservative view for everything. They'll be like, no, you shouldn't do this, right? And so that's where, if you rely on just out of the box ChatGPT or Gemini for regulatory stuff, you will get an adequate, safe response, most likely today, right? They've gotten so good that it's not going to hallucinate that you can take some crazy risk that'll get you in prison, right? It may lose some details on very fine nuances, but even now it's gotten really good at teasing out those nuances of the law. And it will, of course, not legal advice, but it will probably not give you just a blatantly false answer if you're using it right. And there's always that level of user error. And there's so many stories of people going in and using kind of ChatGPT or Gemini for legal work and just getting a terrible result. Like Kim Kardashian failed her California bar exam because she said, she was relying on ChatGPT to study for the exam, and it gave her the wrong answers. She claims, right? Though I think
other factors contributing.
Yeah, there may be other factors contributing to one, probably don't rely on ChatGPT to study for the hardest bar exam in America. I think you're going to get fine with it. Two, there have been even I think at GPT-4, it has something like a 70% passing rate on the law bar exam, because those answers and those questions, they're not challenging cutting edge legal questions, right? They're if you have a contract, what kind of consideration do you need, right? They're not hard questions. And so part of it is are you even using the right model? Were you using ChatGPT free version, which they degrade down to whatever, 5 fast or whatever? It's not
or pro.
Yeah, or using pro, or using the $200 a month deep thinking model to study. And even picking which model you use you can have vastly different outcomes. And so when people say I used AI and it was terrible, I was well, what AI did you use, right? Which model did you use? Were you just chatting with XAI on Twitter and relying on that, or were you paying $200 a month for Gemini 2.5 deep thinking?
Even there, though, we recently had a conversation with a big legal tech startup. They raised, close to $200 million, I think. So they're really not resource constrained. But it was a fascinating conversation with the engineers because they essentially said, look, we've given up trying to fine tune anything. We're just relying on the frontier models. There's just nothing we can do in our lab that's ever going to outperform what these guys are doing, right? So in that sense,
even a specialized field
even specialized people who think about nothing else, they're saying there's really not much more juice that we can squeeze out of what's already coming out of the big labs, right?
Yeah, and I think that's I've always felt this was true, what you're saying. I could never back it up myself because I've never tried to fine tune a model. But that kind of makes sense, right? Because if you think about the intelligence that these models have, seems to be a function of their size and complexity, right? Size is one factor, and then complexity of how they're assembling them now. Because now the GPT-5 is not one giant model. It's 15 different models that it smartly routes between and all these, right? The architecture of it. And it kind of makes sense that even if you have $200 million, that's what OpenAI spends in a week, right? On compute alone, not even counting everything else. So it's you're never going to be able to compete in terms of just raw capability and raw intelligence against the OpenAIs and the Googles of the world. Where you may be able to compete is these really niche areas, maybe law, but I've always also felt that fine tuning doesn't make their model smarter. It just changes the style of what you want, right? It gives a direction, but it doesn't make the brain any bigger.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I fall on this, because on the one hand, I feel, and maybe law is just also different from other subject areas because it touches so many different aspects of life. But it does seem to me, just intuitively, that a smaller model, more specialized, more sort of streamlined almost for a particular use case, could be just as capable. Possibly even more capable, because it's not confused with, all kinds of adjacent topics that might really be not relevant, but actually be counterproductive in moving the model towards a particular outcome that is desired. And why I hesitate a little bit with law is, like
because
you said,
law touches everything.
America is run by lawyers, and law touches everything, right? In order to be a good lawyer, I really need to understand the business problem first. I need to have a sense of reality, like how do these things typically go, right? Like when I go and when I don't know, do a real estate deal, well, actually going to the site and looking at the thing, right? Like, is there concrete falling from the ceiling? And those are things that if I have no knowledge about that, I'm probably not going to come up with the best kind of advice that my client could use. So in that sense, it does touch everything. So maybe that's a simple answer.
Yeah.
But even inside that world, I feel, like a model that is just really good at a particular kind of agreement, for example, and does not concern itself with litigation and the minutiae of court procedure. That's still something I want to see more of.
But then maybe the economic of creating something like that just don't even make sense. Like if you could make, right, if you could fine tune a model for, I don't know, $50 million to be the best, like, Massachusetts will writer in the world.
The market's not
going
to justify that.
Yeah, and then how much percentage of is that model really better than just asking ChatGPT to write you a will, right? Is it 10% better, like 50% better? And like, what's the downside on these kind of like super simple, like isolated agreements that don't touch on the real world?
A friend of mine in the architecture space, so they're looking to fine tune a QN model for architectural use cases. So they've made the decision they're going to do it. Nobody's ever done it before. Building codes and things like that. So you, just get a much more precise kind of starting point of what are the requirements. So they're thinking, they've basically structured the process, the training time or the fine-tuning time itself, like the runtime to do it. It's not going to take even that long. It's probably going to be done within a day. It's just more like structuring the data and things like that. But overall, they think it's going to take them about 3 months.
And I wonder actually about a specialized use case like architecture. Because fine tuning, you're only taking the weights that you've already trained the model with, and tweaking them a little bit, and something super specialized like that. I wonder what base model are they using? And so it's like even that, like what you said before about confusion. If you really want to be a purist, you'd almost have to start from scratch, right? And just take.
Possibly, yeah.
Right? Take a LM of a certain size and just train it from scratch on whatever super specialized thing you wanted to do. And I think in that scenario, if you did it from scratch, you probably could like build something that's amazingly good at some specialized thing because it lacks like any confusion in how the weights are created, that it can do something really, really great. But then I think you really, like my hunch on this is that you kind of need to start from scratch. Like it's probably not enough to like take an open source model like DeepSeek, because DeepSeek is still like 680 billion parameters, right? And so sure, you can fine tune it however much you want, right? You can take a day or a week or whatever and fine tune it however much you want, but you're not going to be able to shift its underlying weights that much,
such impact.
right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, maybe on one of the next episodes we'll have a chance to to talk about it, and
we're gonna find out an engineer
where that goes. Yeah, I think it's a great initiative, and they're just trying it out, right, to see whether it has any positive impact. But yeah, I see your point. I mean, you're skewing the curve essentially more towards those
what
things
you
that you care about more than others. So that's going to be helpful. How much, and is it worth the time and effort? We'll have to see.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like when you fine tune, you change the style of the model, right? You can change how it sounds. You can make all the outputs, sound like Winston Churchill. But you're not necessarily giving the model that much more knowledge or expertise in what you're trying. And I actually wonder about your friends who are doing the architecture thing. If they are, so the one probability is there's a latent like architecture expertise in the model already that is just gleaned from, reading all the architecture books in the universe. And that is being clouded by all the other stuff that biology and, well, you still need physics for...
Hopefully not physics,
right? Not physics, you want to keep the physics stuff. But literature maybe, like you don't really need, a lot of like Emily Bronte in there to be a great architect. And then so fine tuning, you can kind of decrease the strengths of those connections that are tied to like, Bronte and like English literature, and you strengthen the ones maybe around physics and architecture so that even when you do it stylistically, you can shift the curve enough where you get a reasonable amount of capability in your remaining fine-tuned model that is useful for your use case. So that is worth like trying out and doing, especially if you're not going to spend a ton of money on it. But then it's like almost in the legal space, like law just touches everything. So if you want to be a great lawyer, you really have to understand everything about the transaction that you're dealing with and about the business that you're dealing with. And then actually like literature falls into that because it's like, it's helpful to understand like well-written prose to write like a well-structured legal clause. It's helpful to understand like every aspect of your client's business, whatever it is, and by definition, law touches on every single kind of business.
And actually, the other thing, and we're touching on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I think the other thing, as a good lawyer, that you need to be quite capable of is knowing your boundaries. Like where are the what are the topics that I can still make an educated decision about, and where are questions that I really, with the best of my efforts, am not going to get to the bottom of, and where do I need to bring in someone else, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of my major complaints of the tools as of today. They're not very good guidance. There's not very good guidance around that. Like they don't help you as a user, right? They kind of suck you in, and maybe there's some sycophancy going on, and this is a fantastic question, or what a smart observation, all that stuff. But they don't. It's really hard to discern the high quality response in an area that you don't know anything about, right? Especially as a lawyer, and I feel like every lawyer who's using these tools is to some degree or another falling into that trap where, like, if you give me a shareholders agreement, I'm going to have fairly distinct views on whether or not I like it. If you give me a tax opinion, I have some intuitions about this, but I'm not going to be nearly as discerning, and it's very easy to then say, oh yeah, well, that looks pretty good, right? Like that makes so much sense. It's nicely and well written. We've had this phenomenon in other in the newspaper space.
Yeah,
right?
everywhere.
That's where it's been dubbed the Gell-Mann effect, where you read something, you know about it, and you're like, this is nonsense. Like, this is just so poorly written. This is so poorly investigate it, and you turn the page and you read the next article, like, you're like, wow, like these guys, they really went above and beyond, right? Like they really kind of dug into the details, and in reality, that thing is probably just as bad as that first article, right? And it's very easy to succumb to that as you're working with these models.
Yeah, and I wonder, so it's not just lawyers, right? It's everyone. Like, because the model speaks so authoritatively on every topic, and they've been trained so well that you ask them a question about anything, and it sounds plausible and correct, and that's the source of hallucinations, right? Well, it's not the source of hallucinations, it's the source of user error in taking those hallucinations and then incorporating them into places they shouldn't, right? Into the end product. I wonder actually if lawyers, and obviously we're going to be biased here because both of us are lawyers, are more aware of this, because as lawyers you have real liability. Like, if you are a trained regulatory lawyer and someone asks you to like opine on a merger agreement, like the first thing I would say is I have no idea where this is going, right? Like, sure, I can have a read of it and I can point out maybe like glaring errors that I see, but this is not my wheelhouse, and I am not really qualified to give you expert advice on this.
My sense would be that depends on the market in which the individual has played. Like, I feel like if you're sort of in a small, I'm not trying to knock lawyers in small firms in any way. It's just that if you've been exposed to that big corporate world, hedge fund world, where these things really matter, where really everybody's just trying to squeeze out as much juice out of these things as they can, you learn that your opinion on some adjacent area of law is just not going to cut it. You need to bring in someone else who has just so much more experience and expertise. If you're just sort of a lawyer who deals with this, that, and the other.
Corner store, family lawyer.
Exactly. Then I think your sense of that is very different. Also because the nature of your work is different. And I'm not saying your clients are less demanding. I think that would not be the right way of phrasing it. But the issues that they encounter are of a nature that doesn't require
they're not $20 million deals or $200 million deals. They are
exactly.
I hurt my tooth at the restaurant and I want them to pay my dental bills. Those kind of matters. So I guess the stakes are lower, and it's almost like back to like what we're saying. It's almost like then corner store family lawyer is a much higher risk of being replaced, because corner store family lawyer has not necessarily developed a deep enough expertise in any one area to get over his like Gell-Mann. Well, maybe not even Gell-Mann, but he's just not even developed enough expertise to really like look at a specialized commercial agreement and be like, oh no, these three clauses are going to run into trouble because last week, there was this giant deal that went down through litigation, and the judge decided this, and this, and so now we know based on the latest, kind of the bleeding edge that's come out of this court case in the Southern District of New York, whatever, right? That if you write it this way, you're going to get into trouble. This was 3 months ago, state of the art, and as of yesterday, it is a terrible thing to worry about, because like you couldn't get any of his job done if he was reading every single and trying to figure out like on the minutia of these kind of cases. And so by definition, he's an average lawyer looking at the median expertise across a big chunk of the law. And almost by definition, that is what AI is super good at now, right? Taking that median view and regurgitating back to you what it believes the median view to be as of its last training date.
Highest probability token.
Yeah, the highest probability token. And then it's almost like that's what we kind of do as lawyers, right? When you don't have enough expertise to be able to to know, okay, this is clearly wrong because one is either not in the training data, or it's just I have just so much industry know-how that I can bring in, my knowledge of the business. I can still tie in more things than the AI can currently tie in to give you the result. When you're a family, not to denigrate corner store family lawyers or any profession, actually, right? When you are the median level copywriter, the median level newspaper journalist, the median level, so much of white collar work is that median level. You are just taking what you've seen in the past and you've seen a lot of things and just trying to predict the next token, right? Given this circumstance now, what should I write down?
Well, I recently read this. I glanced at this study, which was conducted by the Brookings Institute, and it's an interesting piece because they kind of trying to make predictions about the workforce and kind of how AI is going to diffuse through the workforce and what that means for the labor market. And why I think it's an interesting take is because they have essentially taken a computer scientist and economist and have brought them together to share their views and or to come up with a consensus view from those two angles, right? And if you take the computer science view, then it's just scaling, right? We're just going to keep doubling and doubling the size of these, 10xing the size of these models and the compute, and then everything is going to come out. They're going to get so much better, and that's exactly where, from that perspective, it's going to be really hard for your average worker to, just continue to do what they have been doing. And now the economist's view, on the other hand, is quite different to that because they're saying, well, there's boundaries to that, right? And intelligence is is an enabler of the physical world. So whatever happens, however this technology diffuses into real life, the boundary is always going to be the physical world. So if we can't translate that into the physical world, then we kind of unbounded intelligence in the machine, but nobody's going to be able to do anything with it, right? So I thought that was a very interesting take. So, it's not the first group of people to observe that maybe the plumbers and the construction workers are in a much better place than the people who thought that their jobs will be safe.
Sitting in their nice air-conditioned offices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Writing memos and going to meetings and feeling how important they are.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely something there because as highly educated people sitting at this table, we've put maybe too much of a value on our education and our intellect and spending all that time in school and thinking about hard problems and doing podcasts. And it's almost okay, when you that's kind of the frightening thing is when you can essentially print or manufacture intelligence at scale, which is the theory of all of these AI makers, computer scientists, is essentially we can manufacture intelligence. We've turned it from a finite resource into a resource that's only bounded by energy and chips and how good our algorithms are. How does that change society almost, right? And it's okay, well now it's almost like power. What if power could be free and unlimited? And it's well, what if intellect could be free and unlimited? And discounting that, okay, we're not gonna say the intellect has a will, right? And it's gonna become a sentient being and either kill us all or lead to utopia. We're just gonna say it's a utility, which is I don't think it's gonna have a will, right? I don't think we're gonna get to some tipping point in intelligence. It is suddenly going to have wants and desires and and sentience. I think we are probably falling under this path where it becomes a resource. And how do you then structure society where intelligence is a resource that you can turn on and off, and you can get as much of it as you want. And then it's like, who's then using that intelligence, right? It's the operators. And then if your operators are not equipped well enough, then they're not going to be used properly, no matter how much you have. You can have an infinite amount of intelligence, and it cannot be useful because you just don't know how to use it, right? We have not come up with enough problems where we can throw this at. Just like you can have an infinite amount of power and not be able to use it.
And I think, though, that path is definitely conceivable, though I do wonder whether kind of the lab experience that the makers and the researchers have is just quite a different one from reality. And I feel like the coding agents are a good example. I mean, actually, it's not surprising that the coding agents are as good as they are, because I mean, all these people are computer scientists, mathematicians, are coding all day long, right? This is something that they have very good opinions on. This is something that they can turn out, try, and themselves and see, is it working? Is it not working? How can we improve it? Is it making my life easier? Right? Now, the difference between computer code and the rest of the world, or a large parts of the rest of the world, is computer code is testable. You can, in all cases, make a yes/no decision. Is this the right way? Is this the thing doing what it was supposed to do?
The most efficient way to do something,
Is it that? And for many of the world, that's just not the case, right? And especially for law, right? There is not necessarily a right answer.
Because law reflects society and, where we are.
It reflects values, right? And I always say, if we're unaligned ourselves, like humanity is unaligned. If we were all aligned, we wouldn't have all the problems that we have and all the discussions, all the debates. Since we can't even figure this out yet, the moment when we're bringing this into the machine might be just a little bit further out than we
I think
project, right?
I think there's a lot there to unpack. Probably in our next episode. We are running out of time now. So we will wrap up. What kind of interesting things have you read or seen recently that you want to kind of give a shout out to?
Like very down the line of what we talked about, I think the UK court just a week ago or so ruled on the Getty Images versus Stability AI lawsuit. I haven't really had time to dig into it, but that seems something that should get some attention. As far as I understand, it was largely dismissed, but also on facts, which Getty couldn't establish.
It seems like more of a procedural win than a real substance win, necessarily.
So that one's something I'm going to follow up on. And then just something I read recently, has nothing to do with law or anything like that. The article is called... we're going to have to link it in the show notes or something like that. It's called Why Birds Don't Drive Bentleys and Why Humans Will Never Fly. And it's an interesting take on evolution and like almost looking at evolution like a gravitational force pulling us down into these valleys. And basically where birds sit in one valley and we sit in a different valley, and their way out was basically, or what pulled them into that valley was flight. And what pulled us
different kinds of evolutionary pressures will pull you into lowest energy valleys to accomplish what you need to do.
I thought it was a really cool article and an interesting take of that. Recommend it.
That is, I love that. As someone who studied biology in undergrad, like I always love like thinking about how biology affects like where we are and how we think about things. I've been reading a lot of science fiction recently. 3 books that I really liked were, one was Permutation City. It's about kind of virtual intelligence and uploaded intelligences and how kind of they interact and kind of the consequences of that. Another 2 are, they're all 90s science fiction books, Blind Sight and Echofraxia by Peter Watts. And all 3 of them really touch on like the nature of consciousness and kind of the evolutionary pressures of why we are conscious and in different parts, but also like, is it even important to be conscious, right? Like, we can have, and one of the theories of these books, especially Pierre Watts, is you can have abundant intelligence without needing consciousness. And I thought that was just so interesting, especially given, our day and age of AI and these LLMs, which are, it seems like abundantly intelligent, but most likely not conscious at all.
Let's pick it up there next time.
Sounds good. All right.
Cool.
Thanks, Mathias.
Take care.
All right.